Okay. All right. So we'll have part of it. All right, Renata, and I'll make some notes too to send you out. Because and I also am making a note of
Just the
the
books you're
videos.
quoting.
Yeah. So I'll make a note of that in the videos and I can send that out.
Yeah, so you're reminding me of my eighth grade teacher who
Mm.
used to tell us all that when you use the word terrific, it doesn't necessarily mean it's very good. It could mean that it's actually very horrible.
Terror.
Terror.
Right. Or terror.
That's the root.
Mm-hmm.
So she made us think about that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's curious. These things, the idea is there, even if we lost kind of conscious track of it. The word is reminding us that these things might all be connected somehow. Um, okay, so on the religious version of this, then I do have one of the little videos to show you here is introducing something from William James, who's relatively well known in this sphere. He wrote a book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. Very important book where William James was a psychologist early 1900s, brother of Henry James, the novelist. So he because he's a psychologist, he had this kind of interesting take when he was wanting to look at religion, and so what he does is figures out that when he talks to people, they talk about all sorts of experiences, and so these experiences have got to be an important part of what's going on. And anyway, so the book is a collection of what he found out from a lot of thinking about this and a lot of investigations and interviews with different people, different religious kind of different who have different practices. Some very ecstatic, and some more more like Quakers, more somber. Anyway, here's a little explanation of him.
Now, the term religious experience seems quite broad. The best definitions comes from the philosopher and psychologist William James. He defines a religious experience as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. I see. So it is effectively an experience where you are in the presence of the supernatural or the divine. This experience can come as a vision, as voices, or even just a feeling, but ultimately, the experience will bring you closer to God. James went on to explain that there was in fact 4 characteristics of a religious experience. One was that the experience would be ineffable. It could not simply be explained or be put into words. Number 2 was that the experience would be noetic, meaning that one would receive knowledge from this experience that is otherwise not available through human experience. The third is that the experience would be transient, meaning it will be short-lived. It is a short experience. And finally, the experience would be passive. The person is not in control, but in fact, the experience would be completely controlled by superior power or by God. Right, that makes sense.
So what should stand out there is that the difference between what we're going to talk about as awe and what James was talking about as religious experience was this bit he calls noetic. So think about the guy with the double rainbow. He's doing his best to explain the experience, but we can tell there's so much more going on that the words are not doing justice to it. So we get that it's ineffable. He's not controlling it. It's something that happens to him, but he doesn't take it to be a religious experience because it misses that noetic piece. So that's kind of an important part of it in there. I think when the first bit about it being when he says what humans standing in whatever in relation to whatever they consider to be the divine, I think that has a lot to do with that piece about being something that's larger than the self. So you'd inherently conceive of the divine as larger than the self. But so anytime you're having an experience of awe, that's an experience of something because we've defined that now as something larger than the self. And awe, you don't control the experience, although you can set yourself up for it, which is kind of interesting. So but it's still beyond you. You just can put yourself in the context of it, which is, anyway, I think that's really curious and important. But it's not religious experience because of this noetic piece. And that's, I think, the hardest part to study if you're trying to study religious experience, which really comes out, I think, in James's book too. But because we can, you'll see from looking at the way the psychologists do this, they've figured out a way of kind of being organized about this, and they can routinely figure out ways of putting someone somewhere, and they'll go, wow, and so there you have it. And then they can do things to study, well, how is that affecting them? But those experiences don't seem to change people's lives unless there is something about that piece that is informing knowledge. So, Linda, like what you were describing, you said you had this experience that, and after that, you became a scientist. It sounds like the experience you had was carrying some of that noetic to it, that that it changed your direction because now you understood something you didn't understand before, and you wanted more of it, wanted to know more. Is that reasonable?
I think, as I remember it, I was just well, just to give an example, I was sitting in this biology lecture class in a junior college. So I was probably like 19 or 20. And the lecturer was describing how the heart's formed. It starts out as a vein, and then, it starts to beat. It twists and turns itself, forms itself into the heart, and it just starts to beat. And it just blew me away. I just thought, oh my God, how does something like that happen? So it wasn't like I don't know if it gave me information as much as it just showed me that the world was so much bigger than anything I had imagined.
No, I think that counts. I think that counts. I think that is a description of you learned something from that experience.
Yeah, it opened up like, wow. That's all I can say.
So so I think, which is kind of curious, since what this experience did was it led you to study biology. But I think that is legitimately fitting with what James would call a religious experience. Just kind of curious, but.
And what's curious, I'm sorry, I can't tell if I'm on mute. What's curious is I am not a religious person. I never have been, but I feel a lot of wonder and magic about the world. And it's sort of like, I have never seen an ugly animal, for instance. So like, how does that happen? It's not like somebody was up in the sky and decided they're just going to make beautiful animals, but I have never seen an ugly animal. That's it all, like, kind of, it's just, I don't know.
No, that's okay. There you go. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So anyway, so I think that's kind of, that distinction anyway is going to be helpful to think about. Well, what we're talking about, something that you can often hear religious people talk about, but we're talking about the secular version of it. Okay, what's the difference between that secular version and the religious version? James tells us it's about knowledge. Somehow knowledge has to change. If knowledge changes, you've changed the experience, and it may then be this other thing, not this ordinary secular thing.
Perhaps another way of thinking of that, all experiences come without language. How can you know, for example, what is bitter a bitter lemon. You put
Mhm.
language to it afterwards.
Mhm.
And so the experience of awe is like any experience. It's just an experience. And then we describe it, or we try to put
Mhm. Mhm.
words to it. And some people will then say that it was Rama, or that it was Buddha, or that it was Tara, or that it was God or the Virgin Mary. We just make up these things to try to explain ourselves to other folks.
Mhm. Right.
And don't we also try to define where is the line between that experience, and we learn from it, as you said, it changes us, and schizophrenic or the diseased person, for whom an experience might be outside of the range of normal that is perceived as pathological. So, or you take your LSD, you have a good trip or a bad trip, I understand, but how does that compare to an experience, when it can go off?
Yeah. Now,
And,
okay, and I think that's an interesting point to make. My sense is that yeah, it is in fact all very similar. It's just the causal mechanisms might be different. So someone who's schizophrenic might have experiences that if they're trying to describe them to anyone else, they're going to start using this sort of language that sounds like they're describing a religious experience they had. And other people can stand out in a forest and have that experience and suddenly be overwhelmed with this idea about they've discovered something there, and so then we'll describe that as a religious experience. But you study the two cases, and the mechanisms look different, but the reported experience can be very similar. So that's I think an important thing to keep in mind, that human brains are complicated things, and sometimes they can be broken, but we still only have access to what that person will report to us or what we observe in their behavior. But in terms of what their inner experience is, all we have is what they're reporting, and their reporting may sound just like somebody else's, who had a kind of extreme sort of experience. John, it looks like you want to say something.
well, following up on the brain and the perceptions and all that, my new understanding of people being a sum total of their DNA, chemistry, and experiences, I'm wondering if some people are incapable, given their chemistry, and they don't have to be neurodiverse or anything wrong. It's just they're not capable of seeing the awesomeness. I wonder if that's a situation.
I have a friend who's a retired political science professor. He's 80 years old now, and he used to fish a lot, and there are a couple of us in our friend group have tried to get this out of him. Like, okay, you've been fishing, right? So you know it's like to sit on a boat in the middle of a big lake, look at those big mountains. Like, don't you feel small? Yeah, I feel small in front of the mountains. Okay, now, is there anything interesting about that experience? And like, no. What about when you catch the fish? You got this fish you've been fighting, you've been out there for, there's this big trout you've been waiting for, and this glorious thing is, yeah, oh, I love eating trout. Yeah, but it's just like, I don't think
it's just who he is, right?
The what?
That's just who he is, right?
I mean, he's otherwise, in any other kind of normal psychological test, he'd presumably come up reasonably normal. But you try to test him on this kind of thing, and it's just like a black box. It's like he just has no idea what we're talking about. And so, at any rate, I mean, that's sort of all I've come to tell you, is that, okay, somehow Art's brain doesn't do that. So, which means some people don't have this
Exactly.
experience,
Yeah, yeah.
which then
From
seems
what
kind of
I
sad.
hear, yeah,
Hmm.
from what I hear, there are people who take psilocybin to achieve awe.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can definitely, yeah, you can introduce it artificially through a number of different mechanisms, and those are the strong mechanisms, right? The psychologists we're going to study, they're going to try and work with weaker versions, but yeah, psilocybin or LSD will definitely do that kind of thing to you. Oh my, look at this, 12:58. Okay, so we're about out of time. I did want to start with some of the psychological stuff, so I guess I'll just have to put that off till next week. Okay, so I'm going to make a note of the books I was telling you about and the videos. I'll have links to that just in case, and we'll have the recording. I'll send you a link to the recording, so in case you want that. But of course, yeah. Anyway, and in the future, I'll try to remember to record the whole class instead of just half the class. Oh, I wanted to talk real quick about the reason for the class being shorter. Right. So, usually I would take another half hour and sort of beef up the kind of intellectual content of the class. But this class, I think I really want you all to try to have a little time to do some of this cultivating of experiences of awe. Keltner, the psychologist, he has a phrase, and I don't think he coined it, but uses it a lot. Every day, well, it's actually in the subtitle, the transformative power of everyday wonder. Everyday awe is sort of the phrase, and what the psychology is finding is that if we just put ourselves in some sort of context where we have some experience of something that is giving us a sense of it being larger, it being massive and compared to us, that's a good thing. Now we're going to talk about sort of why that's really, I think, really fascinating issue all on itself, is why do psychologists think this is true? But that's for the future. For now, see if you can just, find, is there a place that you can go where you might be able to reliably try to elicit this experience in yourself? With students, the psychologists have done this with big buildings. You just stand them in front of somebody in front of a 30-story building and tell them to look up. And it's like, wow, I'm really small compared to that. So it's not the best version. I mean, for me, and often it has the element of surprise to it, is Mount Rainier. You're just out driving around and you turn the right corner and all of a sudden the street you're on has this amazing view and there don't happen to be any clouds that day. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe how big that thing is. It's just, oh my God. So for me, finding a spot where I can look at Rainier is one way I can predictably elicit that experience. But anyway, I want you to try and give a little thought to that. Is there some place, somewhere, something you can go do, a spot to be where you could try to elicit this? And the idea is like the psychologist would have you, I'm not going to have you do a formal thing with us with questions and all of that, but just want sort of just to think about sort of what is your kind of state in the world today, right now? How do you feel about things? And when we're at the end of class, and hopefully you've been doing this for 8 weeks, going out and trying to experience a little bit of awe. And if you do it every day is ideal, but the more the better, but ideally every day. And we'll see, at the end of 8 weeks, I'll want to stop at the end of class and remind you that we've been doing this and see, did it have any effect on you? Do you notice anything from doing this experience for 8 weeks? So that's the reason class is a little shorter, is because I am in fact giving you homework. Okay. Any last questions?
Yeah, you mentioned the concept of spirituality, and there's also the concept of spiritual growth. And again, what is that?
Good. Okay. That is a good question. Well, I need to think about that more. It's a really good question.
And I'm curious to know how many people in this class have experienced awe, if that's possible to ask, just like a showing of hands.
It sounds like you all did.
Yeah.
To some degree, yeah.
Okay.
I
Thanks.
even find in those big buildings sometimes when I'm in downtown Seattle,
Okay.
I just can't imagine the architect's mind, the people who constructed it. Oh
Mhm.
my gosh.
There you go. There you
And
go.
that and that it stands.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it doesn't have to be big for me to get an inner sense. It could be in nature when I'm walking in the woods or something. So it's not a sense that I'm small unless I think about it, but just a sense of the calmness and the beauty and of everything around me gives me a sense of peace almost.
And that's a piece we are going to want to talk about, because that's where Burke comes in, is what's the difference between something being sublime in his language, or awesome in ours, and being beautiful. And it seems like those things are connected somehow too. But we'll talk about that in the future. All right, everybody, have a good week. I will see you next week.
Okay,
You
thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.